Hi there. I'm sharing this video today with as a very practical step-by-step approach to dealing with anxiety. And so I'll get straight to it. Um, when you're having an anxiety attack, it doesn't have to be a full-blown attack, but when you find yourself having anxious thoughts, the very first thing to do is to say, actually, hey, cool, even though it really sucks that I'm feeling this way, because it does, it's an opportunity to learn this skill of how to cope with super well with anxiety and having anxious thoughts. Because this is absolutely a skill that can be learned, and with each practice, it's just like any other muscle, it gets better and better until one day it's a non-issue for you. Um, Second is to not try to, this is what I call jump out of the hole in one leap, because you can't, it doesn't work. It just makes things worse. So a lot of people, if they're having anxious thoughts, is they'll say, they'll try to like think of all the reasons why they shouldn't be having anxious thoughts. They'll try to calm themselves down, which is what you're supposed to do, but you can't rush that. You can't jump out of the hole in one leap. So what you want to do instead is acknowledge the fact that you're having anxious thoughts and allow the fact that you're having anxious thoughts. So you can just like hold space for those anxious feelings in your body, even if they are uncomfortable. So you're gonna like take a step back, like not panic. It's like, we hear this all the time when you're in a situation that's, don't panic, because then you're adding anxiety to the anxiety. So the next step is what I call climbing out of the anxiety hole one rung at a time. So imagine you're in this deep, deep hole, and there's this ladder, and you've already decided you're not going to try to jump out, but you do want to get out, obviously. So what you want to do is climb out of that hole one rung at a time up the ladder. And the best way of doing that is to ask yourself a question, which is, what would somebody who loves themselves do? And you're going to ask yourself this really moment to moment. So these rungs on this ladder are really, really small and not very spread apart. So they're tiny little things. For me, it's often take a deep breath. That's the next rung. And then what would somebody who loves themselves do? It's often drink a glass of water. It might be get out of my chair and go over to the window, especially if there's some greenery outside, and just look at a tree. Just enjoy the sight of a tree. And the thing is with this question, it's a beautiful question. It works not only for anxiety, but for any negative emotion. What would somebody who loves themselves do? If you can ask yourself this question whenever you're faced with any sort of decision or uncertainty, what happens is your intuition will automatically plop the answer into your mind. It's going to come quickly. It's not something you're going to have to think about. It's just going to be there in your mind. It's going to be an intuitive knowing. And you can trust it. So, and just do that thing. And if that thing is something too big, then you ask yourself, well, I would do this, but that something about that causes me to feel anxiety. Then ask yourself again, when this is what I would do, but doing that causes me to feel anxious, what would somebody who loves themselves do? And it's going to be something smaller then. So you can always ask yourself this question again and again and again, moment by moment. And what you're doing when you do that is you're going to slowly climb up this ladder, which is the equivalent of your emotional state is going to climb step by step up the vibrational scale. I use this term a lot, but our emotions are on a spectrum, and the really terrible feeling ones are down here, and the nice feeling ones, great feeling ones are up here, and this is a vibrational spectrum. And you can slowly, gradually move up that spectrum. Right, so next, the thing is, like, our anxious one of the most relieving things that we can do when we're feeling anxiety, and one of the answers to the question then for me is often, what would somebody who loves themselves do? It's to actually engage more with the anxious thoughts. I call this turning to face the monster. And that normally what that means is instead of seeing it as like a monster that can hurt you, you want to see it as something that you want to examine closely and understand fully. So think of it almost like a still life. Like if that monster, if you could like examine it and you maybe wanted to take a draw a picture of it like you would of a still life, you're going to want to see all angles of that monster. So practically what this means is taking out a piece of paper, for example. I often do this also on my computer just because it's faster to type. And I will get down all the anxious thoughts that I'm having about that thing that's caused me to have that anxious episode in the first place. And this is, you know, it's strangely relieving to do that. You would think it would make matters worse, but it really doesn't. It's really calming to get them out on paper, to externalize it, to put some distance between you and those thoughts, just to take them all in, and not in any effort to make them go away, but really it's more of the energy towards it is more of one of trying to understand, of curiosity. And that is very, very relieving. Next, I have my notes here. Great. So once you've gotten all your fears down on paper, it could be a place to stop, but it would be a shame to stop the exercise there, because then you can you can turn your attention to something I called conscious creation, which is where you're going to use your imagination, your mind, to lend this desired outcome that's hidden behind the anxious thoughts, always some love, some energy with your thoughts. You're gonna, it's like you've got this plant and you're gonna water it. So what does that mean? That means this anxious stuff, like all those fears that you wrote down, you can then look at each one and ask, what is this causing me to know that I want? What's the other side of this coin? And be really specific. So if you were afraid of work anxiety, to go back to that example, if you're afraid that you're going to have to do a presentation and you're afraid you're going to mess up, or you're not going to seem to know what you're talking about, whatever it is, then you can imagine the other side of that coin, which is that presentation goes super well, you're on your game, you enjoy it, people are engaged, whatever, it goes super well, and imagine that for a second, because we are terrible at imagining what we want to have happen. I mean, people who live really happy lives have gotten really good at this process. But those of us who suffer from things like anxiety and other related negative states, it's because we're not spending any time imagining these desired states that we actually want to have. Because why would we do that? Because we assume it's not possible. We've already believed that it's just not possible, that the negative outcome is much more likely. But if you think about it, that's not true at all. It's this future event, it hasn't happened yet. It's just your mind is going to try to convince you that it is the most likely outcome when it doesn't have to be. And using your imagination to imagine the positive outcome is what's going to make the positive outcome more likely. So the more you can water that plant, the more it's going to grow. Then, so by this point, in maybe only when I do this, when I have my anxious thoughts that come up, and they still do, but I go through this process and it takes anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, and then life goes on. I move on to my next task. I feel super resilient. Good, life is great. So think of it as a practice that you can develop slowly with practice. And again, remember that first step, which to get excited, like, okay, this is something I can learn, and that's going to improve my life so much. So this is actually great that I can have this opportunity to go through these steps and get a little better at it each time. A couple more notes. Anxiety is a part of life. It's going to be with you every step of the way if you're taking steps, which is what we want in life. We want to continue taking steps towards more and more of the things we want and enjoy. They're always going to keep evolving, and that's not a bad thing. This is what growth is. It's what we need on a personal level, in our communities, on a global level. So this is the process of life, is to continue to expand, and know that discomfort, it's that comfort zone. It's going to be with you every step of the way. So when you learn a way of being with it that feels good, that's the goal. It's not about getting rid of anxiety altogether. It's about learning how to take steps with it forward. And another little tip is just at night, just as a general mental emotional hygiene practice, ask yourself at night, have I watered my plant today? And whatever that plant means for you, it could be your desire to overcome your anxiety. It could be your desire to any other. I'm really bad at giving concrete examples sometimes, but it's that thing that you would like to move towards in your life, and ask yourself, have I watered that plant today by just lending it some energy with my thoughts? Our thoughts create our reality. So knowing that, you have to water your plant by thinking the thoughts of the things you want to manifest. That's all. Hope this has been practical and helpful, and see you. Bye. Oh, where is it?